Hi, welcome to Chapter 13 of Graham the Gargoyle, Scaling New Heights. Graham had not expected to arrive at the footsteps of a church. He took a moment to look around as he stood. The portal had dropped him onto a gravel path leading to the two-story brick building, which was impressively tall, its steeple rising at least 5 stories. Making its presence even more striking, it sat atop a large hill overlooking a sizable town below. A light drizzle was coming down. A few feet away, his grandfather groaned and struggled to rise to his knees. The older gargoyle had at least landed on the much softer green lawn. He swiveled his head and stared in shock at Graham. "What are you doing here?" Graham scrambled over to his grandfather's side, helping him slowly to his feet. "I'm here to help." His backpack slipped off his shoulders as he leaned in to offer more support. I don't understand. You can't be here. Please, let me help you." His grandfather waved at the entrance to the church. "Let's get you out of this rain. We'll talk about your foolishness inside." Graham checked to make sure none of the contents of his pack had spilled onto the ground. The young gargoyle put his arm around his grandfather's lower back and nudged the older gargoyle's weight toward him so he could give support as they took the steps together. His grandfather's left arm draped over Graham's shoulder. It was surprisingly cold and rough. Fine dust and grit from the gargoyle's hardened joints mixed with the rainwater, streaking down his stiff arms and legs as he ascended the steps. It was a slow climb. When they reached the top step, Graham slipped free of his grandfather and darted over to the church entrance. Graham opened the door and then returned to help his grandfather. They stumbled into the church. He guided his grandfather to the nearest pew. Satisfied he was safely seated, Graham closed and locked the church door behind him. "Why'd you lock it? That's not what humans do with their churches. They're always open to all." "I didn't want anybody stumbling across us. We don't want them to see us walking around, right?" Graham flapped his wings, accidentally spraying the hymnal resting in a neat ledge in front of him. His grandfather produced a thin smile. "Yes, that's a good point. You'll have to excuse me. As my body hardens, so do my wits. I'm afraid I'm running a little light in the brain power department at the moment. Let me get my second wind." He gulped in several breaths. Outside, the rain picked up as the third traveler to pass through the portal arrived on Earth. Still holding the parchment, the figure retreated to the shelter provided by a maintenance shed next to the ornate church. The tagalong had heard the door lock on the church. Another route in would have to be found. Graham and his grandfather would be heading to the rooftop, the steeple to be exact. The tagalong just had to figure out how to get there first. Graham didn't like how his grandfather looked. The elder gargoyle's mind was a little addled as well. He hadn't even addressed Graham's presence. He was more focused on accessing the steeple. Graham was glad he didn't have to explain himself. He knew they didn't have much time. It would be wiser to get his grandfather to his final resting place and then confess he didn't have a plan how he was going to return to Cascade. His grandfather's whisper echoed through the spacious church. "There should be a set of stairs leading to the steeple somewhere. Check up by the front." Graham marched up to the stage. He examined the decor of the church. He had studied Earth churches when he had been a level 3 student. He remembered having asked his teacher why they needed to know so much about churches frequented only by mortals, and how his teacher had avoided answering. Graham stopped to admire the large pipes of the organ. Centered on the wall in front of him perched a gold cross. At the altar below, fresh flowers stood in a vase. A portrait of what he imagined to be Mary sat beside the flowers. His grandfather's coughing pulled him back to reality. He knew the gargoyle would need help getting up to the steeple. His grandfather had to have some mobility. If Graham didn't find those stairs soon, there'd be no moving him outside of a mortal crane. The young gargoyle raced toward the solid oak door to the left of the organ and elevated choir pews. Trying the doorknob, he found it unlocked. He pulled it open to reveal purple carpeted steps winding upwards. "Got it." "Check to be sure it leads to the steeple." He winced and clutched at his side. Graham ran up the steps, bumping into the curved wall several times in his haste. After ascending over 50 steps, he had arrived at a door with a stained glass inset depicting the parting of the Red Sea. He peered out of the relatively clear glass near the top to see that the door led to the steeple. A discreetly small bell bore the onslaught of the rain outside, which looked much heavier now. The water pelted the steeple, entering from the 3 open sides of the structure. The floor of the steeple was tiled and looked slick with puddles already. Graham went back down the stairs much faster. He re-entered the church, almost knocking over his grandfather, who had made his way through the choir pews and was only feet away from the oak door. Another few seconds, and Graham might have whipped open the door and knocked the weakened gargoyle over. Seeing him struggle to cross the last few yards, Graham's resolve crumbled. "Grandfather, I'm sorry I came. I don't know what I'm doing." The elder gargoyle put an unsteady hand on Graham's slim shoulder. "You have broken many rules coming with me. I know you're frightened." His eyes danced wildly. "But a part of me is so glad you came." Graham smiled as he dropped his backpack to better help his dearest relative up the narrow stairs. "It's going to take us a while to get up all these steps." "That's fine." His grandfather's eyes narrowed slightly. Graham could tell the gargoyle's mind was again in focus. "It'll give you time to explain how you intend to get yourself back to Cascade." Graham grunted as he helped his impossibly hard and heavy grandfather up the first several steps. The now rain-soaked native of Cascade found a rickety ladder in the shed. He propped it up against the church and began to make his way upwards. Lightning sprang to life around him as he shoved the parchment containing the return spell in a pocket. With one slippery hand after another, he climbed, his thoughts dwelling on what he would say to the foolish gargoyle when he reached the steeple. Graham said, "I did have the return spell scroll, but Plord grabbed it out of my hands when I was showing Ott. He took it to his father to get me in trouble. I swiped it from Dad's study. I knew it was council property. He's going to say I stole it." "Which you did." His grandfather's breathing had settled into a disturbing wheezing. "I know, but it was for a good cause. I wanted to come help you. Instead, you've made things worse for yourself. What kind of life do you think you will have here on Earth? You're many years from climbing a church. You will have to always be hiding. I don't want that life for you." "I'll manage," Graham said weakly. "I don't want you to manage. Life is not about getting by. It's about living, truly putting yourself out there. If you stay here, all you'll do is run from life." A gritty film was forming over his grandfather's eyes. It would surely affect his sight. Can you still see?" He waved his hands in front of the gargoyle, noticing his grandfather didn't move to track it. "Barely." His grandfather raised a hand to rub his eyes, but his now limited movement prevented him from doing even that simple feat. He merely brushed a clawed finger against his cheek instead. More of his skin featured gray blemishes. "It's close now. When the eyes go, you know you're near the final moments." Graham pushed at his grandfather even harder. There had to be only a few more steps to go. "This is happening too fast. I wanted more time." His grandfather coughed. "Grandson, it would be nice to have the time to exchange last thoughts, but we can't." The stiff gargoyle summoned the strength to propel himself forward unassisted, managing to clear 4 steps with his effort. He landed at the top of the stairs on his crumbling knees. Deep cracks now riddled his joints. "Words are glimpses into our true feelings. I know how you feel about me already, and always will. Nothing you say in these last few moments will add or subtract from the many gifts you have heaped on me by simply being my grandson." Graham let a tear slide down his cheek as he shoved open the door leading to the steeple to see someone had beaten them to his grandfather's final resting place. Graham inhaled sharply. The figure rushing toward them, backlit by the probing, hungry lightning, was very upset.